63. Number 21, Mississippi State, 70-54 winners over number 7, Texas A&M. Number 8, Iowa State, 79-65 over Colorado. TCU upset number 9, Texas Tech, 69-66. Number 11, Wisconsin scored a 95-74 win over Illinois. Number 14, Michigan State nipped number 13, Purdue, 75-66. BYU blew out number 23, Kansas, 91-57. Women's top 25 last night, number 24, Oklahoma State beat Utah, 68-64. The NBA regular season resumes tonight. The Lakers are home against the Charlotte Hornets. Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
If winter means spending more time indoors, wouldn't it be great if you could upgrade your space? Well, Macy's is here for you because our President's Day sale is going on right now with big savings on what you need to give your home a refresh. Think 20 to 40% off new furniture, like our exclusive Radley sofa, now $21.99. And take 30 to 60% off a new mattress from Hotel Collection, Serta, and more, so you can sleep better. Come into Macy's today and back to a house that feels more like home. Savings off already reduced prices. Exclusions apply.
Mornings can start feeling the same. Wake up, brush teeth, go to work. But with breakfast from Wendy's, it's like, wake up, brush teeth, Baconate with a Breakfast Baconator. Roll with a sausage breakfast burrito. Buddy it up with a Honey Buddy. Or get seasoned with seasoned potatoes. And then go to work. Sorry. When you're ready for a fresh wake-up call, gotta be Wendy's.
At participating U.S. Wendy's during breakfast hours.
How many SportsGrid listeners does it take to change a light bulb?
It takes two.
One to change the light bulb, and one to see if our mobile app can provide the same amount of light. Get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
We're live right here on Football Full Circle. It is FFC. Let me tell you something. Joe Lisi is feeling himself on this Wednesday live right here on the SportsGrid Radio Network. Sirius XM Channel 159 as well. Must have been the TCU plus 7.5 last night that got this guy feeling all juiced up for a Wednesday on Football Full Circle. Lisi guy, always a fun time with you, my friend, for this next hour up until 1 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, yeah, and just a little hint, Jamie Dixon at home in Fort Worth, catching points, always alive, especially going up against the Red Raiders. Big win last night by 3. But you're right, the long off season of college and pro football begins. We have the NFL Combine on the horizon in just about a week and a half away. And now we're starting to get some news and notes around the NFL, right? You know, rumblings about some maybe potential quarterbacks like Kyler Murray that has been maybe linked with the New York Jets. Justin Fields has been linked there as well, potentially wanting to be paired with his former teammate Garrett Wilson. And then Aaron Rodgers and the Matt Stafford situation. We'll see how those pair out, but it'll be interesting over the next few weeks.
No doubt about it, Joe. Always news and notes throughout a football offseason, both collegiately. Yesterday, we spent a ton of time discussing what will be discussed today in New Orleans between the Big Ten and SEC athletic directors, and next Tuesday among all of the FBS conference commissioners and Notre Dame's athletic director as well. Potential expansion already to the college football playoff. But until anything happens, until we get any new info, we focus on the NFL. The franchise tag window opening up yesterday afternoon for the next 2 weeks until Tuesday, March 4th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll talk about some potential franchise tag candidates around the NFL who might be placed under the tag, what it would all mean for their NFL franchises. But, Joe, of course, we've got some news around the NFL that starts with some international flair on this Wednesday. Earlier this morning, we learned the NFL would be returning to Sao Paulo for yet another Brazilian game for a second consecutive year. Of course, it was the season opener on a Friday night for the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles and the Green Bay Packers. And, Joe, we have learned the home team, or at least the team that will have that home designation in Brazil, that will be Jim Harbaugh and his LA Chargers.
Yeah, Harbaugh and the Chargers, year number 2. They made it to the playoffs. They're a hot team potentially to maybe challenge the Kansas City Chiefs in the West. They have the best shot along with Denver and Bo Nix. So, when you talk about these games overseas and to start the year potentially like we had last year in Brazil, it was really, last year's game was dynamic. It went right down to the wire. It gives you an opportunity to get some morning football before the 1 p.m. slate in certain locations. And it's good for the sport in terms of expansion from the sense of trying to get more eyes on the product. I will say, as a football fan, just from the stadium aspect and just a fan base perspective, it does take away from some of these home teams that, like the Jacksonville Jaguars, that play 2 of their games overseas. That's, from a fan perspective, it doesn't give, the fan bases the opportunity to dive in and support their local franchise. So that's the only downside to some of these matchups, Ben.
And of course, Joe, the National Football League, as it continues to grow its brand, pretty good here stateside, right? It is always king. It is still trying to make that international footprint in a variety of places, not just in England or London, but of course, there will be Germany games. There will be a Brazilian game. There will be a German game. There will be an Irish game, much like college football has been doing as of late. The 2025 international game setup as of this moment. We know the Chargers will have that home designation week number 1 in Brazil. We await their opponent. The Jets will play a game in London's Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, as will the Browns. The Jags will play in London at Wembley. The Colts will play in Berlin. The Dolphins will be in Madrid. And the Steelers will be in Dublin. There's going to be a lot of Guinness pints tossed back when the Pittsburgh Steelers make their way across the pond to the Emerald Isle. So, Joe, we are starting to see this expansion even internationally for the NFL. We've got London. We've got Berlin. We've got Madrid. We've got Dublin. And we've got Sao Paulo as well. Is it all that enticing? I'm not entirely sure. We'll see what its imprint is with those local areas and, of course, building the brand in those countries. Do the organizations, the rosters, and the franchises love it? They like money, but I don't really think they love the logistical challenges of all the travel that is underway.
Yeah, agreed. And that's the thing. For some of these teams that are contenders, right? Some teams have back-to-back like the Jaguars had. That was a problem. And again, logistically, when you're flying back and forth, it does take a wear and tear on the players. Some teams opt to take a bye right after they make these London trips or overseas trips. Others, like we've seen in recent years, like the Miami Dolphins, chose not to. And they lose these games directly right at, after they play overseas or in a location. So that is from just the playoff aspect, hunting a title. That could either derail or maybe benefit a particular team. So we'll see how this plays out. But I'll shout out to Roger Goodell. Don't discriminate, Roger. Rome, Italy is a great place. A little red wine and meatballs would be great. A little vino. Don't discriminate against the Italians, baby. They like European football. Let's get them involved in American football. Why not?
Italy's got a pretty robust professional football league, Joe.
Yeah.
Each and every year they're playing a pretty good. I believe Jim Tom Sula is a head coach out in the Italian football league as well. I can guarantee you this. If there was an NFL game played anywhere in Italy, Joe Lisi would be petitioning the SportsGrid higher-ups to make sure that Pro Football Today could travel to it. Might be on Joe to get the deal done, but he would be petitioning just to make sure that could happen.
Yeah, well, he was sponsored by Rayos. You never know. We have Rayos involved, It was out there in New Orleans. Why not pop one up in Tuscany? Go back to the homeland. Why not? I mean, that's what it's all about.
Might have to kiss the hand. Then we can really find our way out.
Always got to kiss the hand. That's it. Always have to kiss the hand. I mean, you want it done right. You always got to pay your respects. But at the end of the day, I mean, we know that Italy has the best food, so we're not going to argue that.
No doubt about it. Although Brazilian steakhouses, I know, are quite good as well. Joe, last year in the matchup to start off the season in Sao Paulo between the Eagles and the Packers, the footing on the field wasn't great, leading to a lot of points because the defenses struggled. I wonder if they'll make that change this year in the National Football League with a little bit more focus on it because last year was the inaugural game in Brazil. I'll tell you, though, Chargers playing whoever, I'll be looking to the over next year for Justin Herbert's Week 1 debut.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But from a field perspective, that is the one thing. If you're going to have these games overseas and in London and in Brazil, you have to make sure that the product is 100%. And more importantly, you have to protect your star players. You can't have players go and play on a surface that, it gives out or gives way to severe injury. Otherwise, now you're hurting your product in double ways. And at the end of the day, that's a lose-lose on every aspect. So the field surface needs to be legit. Better to play it, honestly, on an artificial surface so you don't have the situation that played out in Brazil just a year ago.
Yeah, we shall see exactly what all of it looks like. I wondered if Jim Harbaugh is telling his team with today's news that, listen, hey, in the history of the National Football League, a team that has opened its season in Brazil has always, 100% of the time, won a Super Bowl. So if that's the case, you win in Brazil to start a season in Sao Paulo, you end up winning a Lombardi Trophy 100% of the time, foolproof. Because the Eagles, of course, beat the Packers in Brazil and then ended the year with a Lombardi Trophy. Plenty more around the NFL, including the franchise tag window. Now underway, up next on Football Full Circle.
4 out of 5 scientists agree it's smarter to be on SportsGrid. And we're pretty sure that one scientist is still a virgin. He just gives that vibe. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
This update brought to you by Cintas. 8 green sea turtles were released back into the Atlantic Ocean on Tuesday, nearly a month after an Arctic blast brought a rare snowfall to northern Florida and left the aquatic reptiles suffering from a condition known as cold stunning. A total of 17 sea turtles found stranded last month along Florida's northeastern Atlantic coast were brought to the Loggerhead Marine Life Center in Juno Beach, north of West Palm Beach, for rehabilitation. It snowed as far south as northern Florida, which is extremely rare, and the frigid temperatures reached South Florida. Rapper A$AP Rocky was found not guilty Tuesday of firing a handgun at a former friend on a Hollywood street in 2021. The 36-year-old hip-hop star, fashion mogul, and burgeoning actor, whose legal name is Rakeem Mayers, risked more than 24 years in prison if he had been convicted. On the eve of trial, he turned down a prosecution offer of just 6 months in jail, along with probation and other conditions if he would plead guilty to one count. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
Confidence is knowing you're ready to handle whatever comes your way. That's what it feels like to take on your workday with Cintas. They make sure your AEDs are up to date, your fire extinguishers are tested and inspected, your floor mats are cleaned and delivered, and your workwear looks good, feels good, and is freshly laundered with the Cintas Apparel Plus program. So are you ready to take on today? Visit Cintas.com.
Oh, I'm ready!
And get ready for the workday.
Progressive knows finding your new home was a dream come true. You wanted a walk-up with central air and a skylight, and you found it. Now, every Friday night, you get to fall asleep to the sound of your downstairs neighbors' dance parties. Progressive can't save you from your noisy neighbors, but we can save you money when you bundle your home and auto with us. Get a quote at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers not available in all states.
There's something you should know and always remember. SportsGrid does not increase luck. We're your unfair advantage for the latest sports gaming information. If you're looking for luck, go find a horseshoe. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
It's the off season, but it's always fun here on FFC. He is Joe Lisi. I am Ben Stevens. Joe, some news overnight. Andy Dalton returning to the Carolina Panthers on a 2-year, $8 million deal. His 15th NFL season ahead, his third in Charlotte, providing that veteran experience to the Panthers quarterback room. The last few years, Andy Dalton has started a few games, including in 2024 after Bryce Young was benched. Started 5 games. The Panthers went 1-4. But with how Bryce Young ended the year, Joe, in some optimism for the 2023 number 1 overall pick under Dave Canales for a second consecutive year. Of course, it is Bryce Young's show at the quarterback spot again. does not mean that Andy Dalton will not serve a purpose in that QB room again to provide some of that veteran guidance, if you will.
Yeah, and the hope is that he never steps foot on the field, right? Because now with the second life of Bryce Young and how good and steady he played down the stretch, that Andy Dalton's just the insurance, policy that, just provides maybe locker room continuity and chemistry for Bryce Young to develop in year number 4. So that's the biggest thing, for the team. And the fact that he understands the system, the scheme, he's coming at a very cheap price tag in terms of $4 million per year. You don't have to invest a whole lot for Andy Dalton. And at the end of the day, the hope is that they could get over the 5-win total, get to potentially 8 or 9 wins, and maybe challenge for a wild card. They definitely played much better against better teams, the elite teams like Kansas City and more importantly, the Super Bowl champs, Philadelphia Eagles, down the stretch. You get that type of effort right out of the gate with Dave Canales. Yeah. This team might be a sleeper next year.
Joe, when you looked at the Carolina Panthers in the first year and a half or so of Bryce Young's tenure in the National Football League, consistently booked as an underdog and not even covering numbers, 4-11-2 against the spread, and all 17 games as a dog in Young's rookie year in the 2023 NFL campaign. Still consistently an underdog this past season as well, a dog in 16 of 17 games. But the Panthers ended the regular season from the month of November on. So their final 9 games of the regular season, winning 4. They had only won 3 in the last, I believe that would be 25 games dating back to the start of 2023. And they had covered in 7 of those final 9, all as a dog, playing consistently to the over down the stretch, over in 6 of their last 7, 8 of their last 10, meaning the offense was playing better, the defense not great, and of course played spoiler to the Atlanta Falcons in that Week 18 regular season finale. Would not have meant anything for the Dirty Birds because the Buccaneers did win, but for a time, Joe, on that final Sunday of the regular season, the Buccaneers were trailing against the Saints. There seemed to be an open window for Atlanta, maybe to win the NFC South, and the Panthers in overtime had other ideas. So I think there's a lot to like for Carolina entering this next season, led by Bryce Young, the bright offensive mind that is Dave Canales. Do I think they're a playoff team? Do I think they're going to challenge in the NFC South? Probably not. Do I think they can make it more competitive in that division overall to rise the floor? Maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, what do you think their preseason total would be? 6.5, 7, right? Can't be any less, can't be any more. So you're right in that window of 6, 7 wins. You get the 7 wins. I mean, it's a win for Dave Canales. I think the hope this year is to get to potentially, I would say, 8 and 9. That would be better than where Matt Rule ever had the program when he took over. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to numbers, right? So if you see Bryce Young throw for 4,000 yards and 5+ touchdown passes, that's a pretty good year for him, considering that he didn't have a game where he threw for 3 touchdowns in a game. Let's get the consistency down. They need, Chuba Hubbard will be there. I still think they need another running back to take the pressure off of Hubbard as well. It didn't work out with Miles Sanders. Maybe they get one in the draft, but, and get those complementary pieces. Let's get those explosive wide receivers. Leggett is good. He's not elite. Put some speed around Bryce Young and let's cook, baby. Let's see what we can do. At the end of the day, they have an opportunity to at least challenge for a division championship. I mean, even if it's Tampa Bay again, Ben, do we think Tampa Bay is going to be a 13, 14-win football team?
No.
No, maybe 10-7, 11-6 at best.
Yeah, it's a great point, Joe. The Buccaneers have won the NFC South now 4 consecutive seasons, doing so once with Tom Brady in his final year with a sub-500 record, and in the last 2 years with only 10 wins. You don't need 11, 12, 13, 14 wins to claim the NFC South in the last half decade. You only need to flirt with being above 500, and maybe Carolina can get there. I agree, 6.5, 7.5, probably somewhere in the win total. If it's 7.5, maybe some slight juice on the under, but I don't think it's out of the question, Joe, that Carolina flirts with 500, maybe in that divisional championship race in the NFC South for most of the year. And to your point about Bryce Young, for a guy that could barely throw for more than $150, let alone 200 in the first 16, 17, 18 games of his career, the final 10 that he took over as the starter after the injury to Andy Dalton, threw for more than 200 yards, Joe, 6 times in that span, 15 touchdowns to 6 INTs. Now, was he throwing for 275 plus week in, week out? No. Was it a lot better? Absolutely so. And you would think, Joe, year over year, because it was very tumultuous in Bryce Young's rookie campaign, Frank Reich fired after only 11 games, and then, of course, an interim head coach, that you have Dave Canales, who's great offensively for a second consecutive year. That's growth and improvement together.
Yeah, and then it's a young nucleus, too. You have young playmakers on the defensive side of the ball, right? So everything is there to just say, okay, let's build on the success that we had last year. And I like Dave Canales. I thought he would be good. He started slow, and part of that was the development of Bryce Young, maybe. And the rumor came out last year that he only broke down film and wasn't really involved in the playbook early. They only played him one series in the preseason. Hopefully that changes this year.
Yeah.
And now the sky's the limit, and maybe he can live up to the expectations that he performed in Tuscaloosa.
Some talented wide receivers around him, like his fellow young star in Xavier Leggett, who, of course, was a first-round pick for Carolina in 2024. A lot to build on entering 2025. Franchise tag window is now open. We'll talk about it next on Football Full Circle.
There's smart and there's not smart. Not smart is hope as a strategy. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. Keep it here and win. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. The SportsGrid Radio Network presents This Date in Sports History.
In 1980, The Raging Bull is released, directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Robert De Niro as boxer Jake LaMotta.
Hey, Ray. Never went down, Ray. You never got me down, Ray.
LaMotta's brawls with Sugar Ray Robinson were legendary, as the two clashed 6 times in the ring, with Sugar Ray taking 5 of the bouts. For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
The Technology Minute with George Capalbo.
Full self-driving cars are still not reality, but most modern vehicles now offer some kind of driving assistance like lane keeping or automatic braking. New North Carolina State research tests 3 ways to get a distracted human driver to take control. Number 1, warning bells. 2, spoken instructions.
Please avoid the bridge abutment.
And number 3, a more conversational approach.
Tell me, what did you eat for lunch? By the way, that's a bus.
And the winner, conversation.
I'm not sure where we're going, but I'm sure we'll get there eventually.
Follow me at Capalbo on X and stay tuned to The Technology Minute for more cool stuff like this.
The early line.
The Chargers can certainly make some moves. So question number 1 for LA this offseason, where on offense should the Bolts invest that money?
Wide out, and more wide outs here. You should be eating on the outside. Not have a guy like Quentin Johnston who can't catch a football. It's 50-50 at best that the ball hits him in the hands or in the face while he's wide open.
It's the early line with Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside. Weekdays, 8 a.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific on the SportsGrid Radio Network. Wherever you go, there you are. Download the SportsGrid mobile app and we'll be right there with you. So now you can get the winning edge anywhere. Even while the wife's talking to you. If you got an earbud. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle, it is FFC. Yesterday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, the franchise tag window in the 2025 NFL offseason opened up around the National Football League. Joe, it will be open for 2 weeks from 4 p.m. Eastern Time yesterday through Tuesday, March 4th, also at 4 p.m. Eastern. Of course, there will be some notable names that are eligible for the franchise tag where they can be placed on a transitional or franchise tag to remain under team control. Then, if you are placed under a tag, you stay on that team. It allows a negotiating window that runs through whenever the tag is placed on you through July 15th, right before training camp gets started, to agree on a long-term extension. If no long-term extension is agreed upon, you can have a short-term 1-year deal or, of course, play under the franchise tag. Lease a guy for a second consecutive year. More than likely the biggest name that will be tagged is T. Higgins, if we trust the Bengals at their word, as we discussed to end out yesterday's show. Cincinnati is saying they want to pay everybody. They want to hand a long-term extension to everybody. But to keep T. Higgins from being a free agent about a week after the tag window ends, they are hoping to franchise tag him to give them that prolonged experience to negotiate and give him that long-term deal. Not officially tagged just yet, but we think, Joe, that T. Higgins will be placed under the franchise tag for a second consecutive year in Cincinnati.
Yeah, so if you're going to do that, right, which, okay, from a business aspect, no problem, but then do the right thing and get the deal done immediately, okay? I mean, don't let it linger like the situation, and I know it's a different type of situation with Lamar Jackson, where we basically got it, right before the 25th hour, and we closed the door, and then we just let it play out. Because I'll tell you this right now, you have a player that's given his heart and soul to this organization. He stepped up in the biggest game and outplayed Jamar Chase in the Super Bowl, right? He played under the tag last year. He wants his money. He's deserving. And he's a nucleus and a foundation of this offense. Why let it linger in the offseason, which sends a terrible message to the younger players on that team, offensively and defensively, and sets your organization back from just looking at the big picture, which hopefully is an AFC championship run. So no problem with the franchise tag. Do it and then get the deal done immediately so you can move forward and concentrate on the NFL draft.
No doubt about it, because if you do not tag T. Higgins, he becomes a free agent starting March 10th. Technically, the league year gets underway on March 12th, which I believe is exactly 3 weeks from today. But with that being said, Joe, the exclusive negotiating window, otherwise known as the tampering window, opens up that Monday, where we learn all about the deals that will then become official once the league year actually gets started technically that Wednesday afternoon. If you allow T. Higgins to test free agency waters, he will see what his true market value is. And believe me, he would be the biggest name free agent in the wide receiver market, the biggest name free agent overall this year. And Joe, there would be many potential suitors around the NFL willing to pay T probably even more than his market worth. So it would make sense then for the Bengals to franchise tag him if they do actually agree on a long-term extension. If they don't, Joe, it's bad business, not only for T. Higgins, but it's also bad business for the Bengals. Because something that we've discussed around the NFL that you've heard more and more is the idea of cap flexibility, structuring contracts so that it's not just annual average salary or base pay, but you structure it in a way that there's bonus signings up front, that you get your cash early. There's guaranteed money early. And then for your franchise, it's less of a cap hit and there's less to spend at the tail end of these deals. Joe, for wide receivers in the market, it's a little bit more than $25.6 million this year in terms of that franchise tag value. Now, T. Higgins is absolutely worthy of at least $30 million per year. But if the Bengals even tag him, it's not like they get T. Higgins on a discount, because that's all base salary that they would have to pay T. Higgins that would eat up their cap space, where they probably wouldn't be able to make those big long-term deals with guys like Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, great point. And the other downside is you don't want him to go to a team like Buffalo that you're competing with. So, I mean, make up your mind. You have to have a vision of how this year is going to go, and you got to pull the trigger.
You absolutely do. We'll see if the Bengals do, if they tag him, or if even a long-term extension can be reached before the league year fully gets underway. Some other eligible franchise tag candidates, and if it makes sense, next.
The winning edge. You've got it. But not everybody has it, because not everybody listens to us. But we're working on that. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Progressive presents the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders. Spring training ramping up. Cactus League and Grapefruit League action set to get underway later this week. The Yankees were as shocked as anyone when Juan Soto signed with the Mets. Yankees captain Aaron Judge on the move.
I wasn't too surprised by it. You know, you got a pretty nice deal over there, so I think you can't say no to that. But I'm happy for him. You know, he got a good deal. It's going to be great having him in town. We're going to be battling back and forth for quite a few years. So I'm definitely happy for him.
The NBA season resumes tonight following the All-Star break. One game on the schedule. The Hornets visit the Lakers. The game was rescheduled from January the 9th when it was called off due to the LA wildfire. LeBron James is questionable for the game tonight. He sat out the All-Star game for the first time in his 20-year career due to an ankle injury. Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
If winter means spending more time indoors, wouldn't it be great if you could upgrade your space? Well, Macy's is here for you because our President's Day sale is going on right now with big savings on what you need to give your home a refresh. Think 20 to 40% off new furniture, like our exclusive Radley sofa, now $21.99. And take 30 to 60% off a new mattress from Hotel Collection, Serta, and more so you can sleep better. Come into Macy's today and back to a house that feels more like home. Savings off already reduced prices. Exclusions apply.
At Skechers, we put the S in comfort.
Wait. Skechers put the S in comfort?
Yes, comfort you have to feel to believe. Skechers, we put the S in comfort.
Let me try. Okay, I'm just stepping in and... Oh, wow. Skechers put the S in comfort.
Duh, we told you.
Find Skechers slip-ins at a Skechers store, Skechers.com, or wherever stylish footwear is sold.
You're listening to SportsGrid, spreading the winning edge far and wide. Terrestrial, internet, TV, satellite, and don't forget our mobile app. Face it, the winning edge is everywhere. Somewhere there's a squirrel frustrated he can't get a phone. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle, it's FFC, the franchise tag window, now open in the NFL and open for the next 13 days until the week from Tuesday. That would be March 4th, around 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Joe, as we shared, the most notable franchise tag player a season ago, probably T. Higgins. We expect that to be the case if we take the Bengals at their word once again this offseason. They have said, though, unlike last year when they tagged him just to keep him in-house, they hope to agree to a long-term contract extension. 9 players in total, either under the franchise or transition tag a season ago. Most, except for T. Higgins, then did agree to a new contract extension, including 2 guys, L'Jarius Sneed, tagged by the Chiefs and then traded to the Titans. Brian Burns, tagged by the Panthers and then traded to the New York Giants, agreed to a new deal in their new home. Joe, a couple of other potential tag candidates. Javon Holland, the safety for the Miami Dolphins. Stephon Diggs, maybe for the Houston Texans. Oso Odigizua, of course, the defensive tackle for Dallas. Ronnie Stanley, offensive lineman, left tackle for the Baltimore Ravens. Trey Smith, a guard on the offensive line for Kansas City. We'll get to one other name in just a moment. But, Joe, there is some talent out there that could potentially be placed under the franchise tag.
Yeah, I think Holland would be for the Dolphins. They need all the defensive help they can. They need to keep him. I think they franchise him. And I would say Diggs is a pretty good option for Houston. I mean, never really even played, basically. But, 8 games with C.J. Stroud in Houston? I mean, if Houston's going to make a legitimate run, they still need wide receiver help. We don't know when Tank Dell's coming back. Xavier Hutchinson never lived up to expectations. You have a veteran in a new landscape. Give him an opportunity to shine with Nico Collins. That would be another option for me, unless you're going to make all in on potentially a free agent signing for one of these, wide receivers that hit the market. But at the end of the day, you have a guy in there. Now, he is coming off an injury, but he still understands your scheme and philosophy, and he is a former All-Pro. I would think Diggs and Holland are the 2 best options at this point.
It will be interesting, Joe, to see what the Texans do with Stephon Diggs. Of course, it was a blockbuster deal last offseason to add him to Houston. He was injured throughout this season. Of course, that did not help C.J. Stroud nor did the loss of his friend and wide receiver in Tank Dell. But Stephon Diggs is now a free agent. If they were to tag him, Joe, based on the numbers for what a wide receiver would earn under the franchise tag, he would actually make more this upcoming year in annual average salary than that of Nico Collins. I wonder how that would sit both in the organization in terms of egos, but also does that even make financial sense? Joe, the franchise tag was designed to benefit the organization, not necessarily the player, but the organization. On a discount or a perceived discount, you could keep a guy in-house. You were the only team then that could negotiate with him to figure out an extension, a deal that was different than just that annual salary. But as the salary cap continues to spike in the National Football League, and of course, even annual average money, as you average it all out between positional groups in the NFL, continues to be on the steep incline as well. We're talking record-setting deals each and every offseason at various positions, Joe, just because of inflation and where the numbers in the salary cap have gone. Some of these prices that you have to pay based on the franchise tag, which is tallied up from the average annual of all the positional groups at that, or all the players at said position across the NFL, the organizations, the franchises, are not necessarily getting a great discount. And as we have said, there is something called cap flexibility, that when you sign a guy, you can broker a deal that is financially ideal for the franchise. Signing bonuses up front, guaranteed money up front. So your cap hit is less and less, even as you are paying these mega contracts. But Joe, when you tag somebody, it's just that base salary. There's not that financial freedom to then benefit the rest of your roster and filling out those other key positional needs that you have. So the franchise tag, in my estimation, at least in having a player play under the tag, not just to retain him to then eventually agree to some sort of extension, but to have him play under the tag, is not actually all that valuable any longer for the franchise.
No, it's not. Again, you have to make the right, each organization has the right fit, right? They have to have a vision in place. Are we going to build with a nucleus of young talent and then sprinkle in veteran, key free agents or players on our roster that we're going to extend to put us over the hump? Or are we going to go all in with veteran all-star talent, try and pay them, try to take the cap hit and see how far we could go, right? And a lot of these guys, are like Stephon Diggs and Holland. They're key pieces on major needs, right? We're talking about safety. We're talking about, obviously, wide receiver, whether it be number one or number two, depending upon the team. Those are needs that in today's NFL, you have to meet. You don't have that, you're not going to compete. That's the bottom line. So we'll see what happens with Diggs. And now I understand the dollars and cents. But Nico Collins, again, was injured. He was injured as well. For Diggs, I don't know. I just think that with him in that lineup, along with Nico, you give CJ the best opportunity to flourish. And now with Mixon as well, they are a contender if they could stay healthy. Look at how they played against Kansas City. There still should be, in my opinion, under 20-1 to win the AFC and, more importantly, the Super Bowl.
More than likely, Joe, going to be a minus money odds-on favorite to win the AFC South now for what would be a third straight season. Another name who could potentially be franchise tagged by Minnesota would be Sam Darnold at the quarterback position. But, Joe, the franchise tag value for a quarterback, because of these skyrocketing deals in the QB spot, Dak Prescott making $60 million, Jordan Love, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence making $55 million per year, is $41.3 million. The Vikings are not going to pay Sam Darnold that to have him in a quarterback battle with J.J. McCarthy, and more than likely behind McCarthy in the depth chart when all is said and done. And there is going to be a team that is willing to pay Sam Darnold, but probably not north of $41 million. Don't think we will see a quarterback placed under the franchise tag this offseason.
No, not at all. I mean, we'll see what happens with Sam Darnold. Again, he's better off. I mean, if you're Minnesota, you can't go with Sam Darnold based off the last two games of the regular season, and you have to see what you have in terms of J.J. McCarthy, right? You've plateaued with Sam Darnold. If you were able to win that game or at least put up 30 points against the Rams, you can make the argument or the assessment that Sam Darnold should be under center. But you saw what you got. You plateaued. You couldn't get over the hump. And now you have to move on. Where does Sam Darnold go? He's certainly not going back to the Jets. He's going to go to a team either like maybe back to San Francisco, maybe, or more importantly, like Las Vegas. That would be a perfect option. Right. He's an above-average quarterback in a major rebuild. They would throw maybe 30, 35 million at him, and you have an opportunity to at least compete in the AFC West.
No doubt. And for Sam Darnold, whatever payday he has this offseason, more than likely is going to be the best second contract he has received. A $10 million deal for his 1 year in Minnesota, which also seemed a little bit high, but of course he made good on that. Joe, I do believe Sam Darnold will test the free agency waters, and we'll hear what his value is based on what NFL teams are willing to pay. I agree with you. Something around the $30 million ballpark seems to make sense for me. Is Sam Darnold the guy to elevate your franchise overall? Probably not, as we saw on the biggest stages this year for the Minnesota Vikings. Is he going to be consistent, you would think, as a starting quarterback? Yeah, absolutely so. That's the interesting thing about this quarterback market this offseason, Joe. There's not a lot of guys out there that really move the needle to make a team a playoff or conference contender. Plenty more on Football Full Circle up next here on SportsGrid Radio.
We're not saying every SportsGrid listener is a legend, but you might start thinking about who's going to play you in the movie. Just saying. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
This update brought to you by Cintas. 8 green sea turtles were released back into the Atlantic Ocean on Tuesday, nearly a month after an Arctic blast brought a rare snowfall to northern Florida and left the aquatic reptiles suffering from a condition known as cold stunning. A total of 17 sea turtles found stranded last month along Florida's northeastern Atlantic coast were brought to the Loggerhead Marine Life Center in Juno Beach, north of West Palm Beach, for rehabilitation. It snowed as far south as northern Florida, which is extremely rare, and the frigid temperatures reached South Florida. Rapper A$AP Rocky was found not guilty Tuesday of firing a handgun at a former friend on a Hollywood street in 2021. The 36-year-old hip-hop star, fashion mogul, and burgeoning actor, whose legal name is Rakeem Mayers, risked more than 24 years in prison if he had been convicted. On the eve of trial, he turned down a prosecution offer of just 6 months in jail, along with probation and other conditions if he would plead guilty to one count. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
With Fidelity Wealth Management, a dedicated advisor gets to know you and your goals to build a comprehensive plan to help grow and protect your wealth. Backed by a team of specialists, they'll analyze all your accounts, even the ones they don't manage, to keep an eye on taxes and provide proactive portfolio insights that can help you unlock your wealth's full potential. Learn more at fidelity.com/wealth. Investment minimums apply. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. Member NYSE SIPC.
Confidence is knowing you're ready to handle whatever comes your way. That's what it feels like to take on your workday with Cintas. They make sure your AEDs are up to date, your fire extinguishers are tested and inspected, your floor mats are cleaned and delivered, and your workwear looks good, feels good, and is freshly laundered with the Cintas Apparel Plus program. So are you ready to take on today? Visit Cintas.com.
Oh, I'm ready!
And get ready for the workday.
Ask any player and they'll tell you any advantage is important. That's where we come in. SportsGrid delivers gaming strategies and analysis 7 days a week. The winning edge. It's your advantage to more winning more often. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle. It is FFC. Joe, as we're talking about potential franchise tag candidates around the NFL. We mentioned 2 offensive linemen who are very good at their jobs, very good in their position, and are definitely some notable names, but not necessarily likely candidates just because of their value. Ronnie Stanley, who was a Pro Bowler this year as the blindside blocker for Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, and Trey Smith, one of the most consistent offensive linemen at the right guard spot for Kansas City this season. The reason I say, Joe, they're probably not going to be tagged because for O linemen, it's $25.15 million. And based on where both the Chiefs and the Ravens are in terms of their available cap space, that wouldn't make a lot of sense. Now, I say all of that because both Kansas City and Baltimore, I think, are going to try like heck to make sure that both Trey Smith returns to KC and, of course, Ronnie Stanley to Baltimore, just not sure it's under the franchise tag.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about key components to the offense, right, for both of those players. And at the end of the day, offensive linemen, you need to compete at an elite level, especially for Lamar Jackson. And you talk about Kansas City with Pat Mahomes. It's the bottom line. You need to protect your biggest asset, and that's your quarterback, right? Super Bowl winning quarterback or MVP caliber quarterback. So, but the dollars and cents have to make sense to the cap, and they have to make sense to your vision for the upcoming season. And again, what does Baltimore want to do? They want to run the football, they want to pound you into oblivion, and they want to protect Lamar Jackson and work off of play action. And that offense was elite for most of the season last year. And Stanley's the main reason why. How they go about it, we'll see what remains. But at the end of the day, he's definitely going to be on the roster, in my opinion, in 25.
Yeah, absolutely so. And Ronnie Stanley, who was a little bit injured the last few seasons in the Charm City, was really out there in full this year as well and at a Pro Bowl level. And Joe, we know that a priority for the Chiefs this year, after what happened in Super Bowl 59, they will make sure this offseason a point of emphasis is the offensive line. It's much like what we saw back in the 2021 NFL or 2020 NFL season as well, right? Where they came up short against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Patrick Mahomes pressured constantly. They rebuilt the offensive line. I would expect Kansas City to do much of the same this offseason. Joe Thuney, who's really an all-pro guard, had to flex out to left tackle, not his natural position. The Chiefs will look to address the left tackle spot in the draft and free agency. If Ronnie Stanley, for whatever reason, walks, the Chiefs will line up probably first in line to try to get his services. But Trey Smith was one of the better pieces of that O-line, Joe. Of course, they've got some issues on the outside with Jawan Taylor, always seeming to get false start penalties and is one of the most penalized tackles in the NFL. But Trey Smith at right guard, Creed Humphrey at center, and Joe Thuney at his natural position, left guard, is as good of an interior offensive line trio, if you will, that you'll find around the National Football League.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about one of the most dominant offensive lines, and that's why they've been as successful as they have in dominating the AFC. At the end of the day, when you have continuity on the offensive line, everything is so much easier. Easier to run the football, easier to work off of play action. And just look at the domination for the Philadelphia Eagles this year with the offensive line, right? That was a question mark in the preseason. Certainly wasn't during the regular season. The biggest thing, too, is that when you have a player, whether it be a tackle, a guard, even a center, that can play multiple positions, that helps you throughout the regular season, especially when injuries occur, right? We saw Landon Dickinson and Philadelphia step up throughout the regular season. That's what happens. So you need players that can play multiple positions on your lineup. But again, offensive line, these things, Ben, it is intriguing to see how teams view offensive line help, how certain teams build depth at every position of the O-line, and others really just, I want to say, skimp in certain areas and then load up on skilled talent. That makes or breaks some of these organizations. So it is intriguing.
Yes, it certainly is. Landon Dickerson, the guy that Joe Lisi was trying to break down for you right there. Yes. He's an FSU transfer?
Yeah.
Landon Dickerson? Oh,
I believe so.
I didn't realize that.
I could be wrong.
Good stuff. You always learn something from the mastermind. But again, just based on where those franchise tag values are for specific positions. Joe, we remember a couple of years ago, right, when the running back was just barely above $10 million and the running back was basically a lost cause in the NFL and all that it was because of the salary increases and because of guys like Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs getting paid this offseason, Derrick Henry included in there as well. That running back franchise tag value is $13.6 million. Again, at a time, it made a ton of sense for a ton of NFL clubs to tag a running back because you get that discount to keep them in-house. Not necessarily the case this time around. So as we get some of that franchise tag news, we will break it down for all of you. Lisa, guy, when you look at some of these odds around the NFL, we're still waiting on conference odds and divisional odds, and certainly later this offseason, we'll get those 2025 win totals. But we have seen a decent amount of movement all around the Super Bowl 60 prices. The Niners have seen their price shortened by $5. They're now 12 to 1. The Bengals have seen their price shortened by $7. They're now 17 to 1. The Packers have come down at 21 to 1. The Commanders up by $5 from where their price opened at 23 to 1. And a team you highlighted, the Houston Texans, alongside the Chargers, both at 28 to 1. Promising in the AFC and yet not proven at this moment. It is interesting, Joe, to see these markets move this early on in the offseason.
Yeah, yes and no. I think when you have like veteran teams, right, you know, you have experienced gamblers that wouldn't mind tying up the money, you know, for potentially 7-8 months because you know that the value potentially is not going to be there unless you pull it early and often, right? So teams and veteran prices like the Bengals with Joe Burrow, knowing that they'll potentially maybe re-sign T. Higgins, that's a huge asset to your offense. And we talked about it yesterday. They can outscore anybody. Forget Hendrickson in the defense. As long as that's there, they're going to be there.
If they can be average, that will be good enough more than likely. I would like to highlight one team in particular, the Lions Super Bowl price. Next.
Luck is winning the lottery. Strategy is settling your divorce before cashing in the ticket. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. Get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. SportsGrid TV and radio networks are the premier streaming video and audio channels dedicated to serving the sports wagering audience. Found on major smart TV platforms and streaming on SportsGrid Radio and Sirius XM Channel 159. SportsGrid's real-time data, expert commentary, and entertaining analysis transform viewers into informed sports enthusiasts. Our weekday radio lineup begins with the early line at 8 a.m. Eastern with Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside. Donnie joins Kevin Walsh on Moneyline at 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Football Full Circle at noon Eastern. Kaplan and crew join the party at 1 p.m. Eastern, and Pharrell Coast to Coast keeps things rolling from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Get in the mix with Kevin Walsh and Game Time Decisions at 6 p.m. Eastern. Evenings simmer with Carver and Lisi, then boils over with Gabe Moritzi on Sports Rage Late Night at 10 p.m. Eastern. To find out where to find SportsGrid that's best for you, go to sportsgrid.com. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning-fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. That's 800-797-1292.
Think of us as your cool roommate that has this innate gift of somehow always picking winners and never bugs you about doing the dishes or paying rent. Sports gaming strategies and information 24/7. Get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle for just a few more moments. Lisi, I said right before the break, the Detroit Lions Super Bowl 60 price at 9 to 1. Fifth best right now around the NFL, only $2.50 behind the Eagles, who are the Super Bowl 60 favorites, with a plus 650 price. Detroit not just fifth best around the NFL, but second shortest number for an NFC team to win a Lombardi trophy. Of course, that has always eluded Detroit. In fact, even playing in the game that allows you to win a Lombardi Trophy. A Super Bowl appearance has eluded the Lions. They have not played in a Super Bowl, let alone won a Super Bowl championship. And yet, Joe, entering this postseason as the 1 seed in the NFC, the Lions were booked as the favorites to do just that. Really, the main issue for Detroit this year was a defense that was so incredibly banged up among so many key contributors at basically every level of the defense. By the time they got to the divisional round against the Commanders, really, they just did not have a ton left in the bank. But, Lisi, with that being said, if I were to tell you that the head coach, Dan Campbell, remains, that the quarterback, Jared Goff, remains, that their two-headed monster in the backfield and Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery remain, that Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams and Sam Laporta and other guys all across the entirety of the offensive line for the most part return as well. Why am I blanking on the Penei Sewell is coming back, that Aiden Hutchinson should be healed and ready to go, that so many of the key contributors, Joe, really the same cast and crew that allowed the Lions to be the 1 seed in the NFC for the first time in franchise history come back next year. Wouldn't you expect the Lions to have a better price? Well, I think one of the biggest questions, Joe, is how much will the loss of both coordinators, offensively Ben Johnson, defensively, of course, Aaron Glenn, hurt the Lions this upcoming season? The odds makers do expect some regression.
I do as well. And again, when you have a losing organization, like Detroit was before Dan Campbell got there, and then you get a level of success and you have expectations and you're so close to those, expectations and final eye on the prize in the Super Bowl, and you do not get there. And then all of a sudden, some of the pieces start to dissipate and the coordinators move on. Look at Philadelphia, right? There is a regression. And, it's one thing to have a winning organization like Philadelphia that regrouped and got back to a Super Bowl this year and won it. It's another thing to just keep that together with a losing organization that was so close and never sniffed it and never got there. Now it's like, it's like we'll never get there. If we didn't get to the Super Bowl over the last 2 years, Ben, we'll never be able to get there no matter what. Now you lose those 2 huge pieces. You're Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. Now, all of a sudden, the questions start to seep in. And by the way, the NFC is getting better. You have teams like Washington that elevated. You have a team in Green Bay that didn't live up to expectations, but that's there. Minnesota that competed for much of the year and had 14 wins. And Chicago, with your former OC, you might not even win the division this year.
Yeah, and that will be a huge component of it, Joe. The NFC North is going to be good. The Bears expected to elevate immediately. The Packers expected to be right there. Will the Vikings be a 14-win team with a de facto rookie quarterback in J.J. McCarthy? You'd probably say no, but of course they're going to be a talented team. If Kevin O'Connell can get Sam Darnold to a 14-3 record and challenge for the division, then you would expect him to be able to do so with J.J. McCarthy and a guy they believe in there as well. A lot of free agents for Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah to make sure he pays this offseason in Minneapolis as well. Not necessarily the case for Brad Holmes in Detroit, but still some key guys like Kevin Zeitler, Carlton Davis, a couple of those key contributors. I just think it's fascinating, Joe, because the players all return for the most part. Dan Campbell, who has built that mentality in the Motor City, is back. But you lose 2 of the most talented coordinators in the NFL, seen immediately in both of them getting head coaching jobs. Joe, if the odds makers are correct, if you are correct, and the Lions regress, opens up the NFC. However, if Detroit is still just really good, as they have been the last 2 years, that 9-1 price to win a Lombardi Trophy this year is going to be considered value very quickly on into the regular season.
Oh, absolutely. That would probably be cut in half, right? By week 8, it would be like 450 or 4-1.
Yeah, absolutely so. So it will be interesting to see what wins the day. He's Joe Lisi. He said it. I am Ben Stevens. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Football Full Circle, noon Eastern time on SportsGrid Radio.
Now you've done it. You've found the advantage for gaming, odds, and more. But we call it the winning edge